Hi everyone, welcome back to Coffee Books and Rain. I'm Rachel, and as we can tell, I have a slightly new background. Now, it is a familiar bookshelf, but it has been rearranged a little differently because we are in a new house. However, the rest of this room is not finished, so this will not be the permanent background yet. But I did realize as I was editing a few episodes that some of my focus was out of whack, and so I have decided to redo those and try to finish out October, with as many episodes as I possibly can. So let's dive into the book of the moment, and it is The Everlasting by Alix Harrow. I did record this about a week ago, however, it is one of the ones that just did not work out well as I was going into edit. Now, little Leo is over here next to me, and so you may hear him pitter-pattering on the floor into the kitchen and back and forth. So if you hear that, that's just him exploring his new home. But The Everlasting by Alix Harrow, from the New York Times bestselling author of Starling House, comes a moving and genre-defying quest about the Lady Knight whose legend built a nation, and the cowardly historian sent back through time to make sure she plays her part, even if it breaks his heart. Sir Una Everlasting, I was going to say Lovegood, that's not the right word, was Dominion's greatest hero, the orphaned girl who became a knight, who died for queen and country. Oh, sorry, little Leo came over to get some pets on the head. All right, her legend lives on in songs and stories, in children's books and recruiting posters, but her life, as it truly happened, has been forgotten. Centuries later, Owen Mallory, failed soldier, struggling scholar, falls in love with the tale of Una Everlasting. Her story takes him to war, to the archives, and then into the past itself. Una and Owen are tangled together in time, bound to retell the same story over and over again, no matter what it costs. But that story always ends the same. If they want to rewrite Una's legend, if they want to tell a different story, they'll have to rewrite history itself. It is considered a fantasy, romance, historical fiction, which I'm kind of on the fence about, and romantasy. Now, I thought this was a really cute book, and I think Alix Harrow has a really great way with just her writing style feeling dark or maybe like gritty fairy tales, and I think this really has that appeal. Now I have Argos over here beside me, but the camera angle's just not getting them because I am sitting on the floor. So this is why you guys will kind of see me moving around just a little bit, is because I'm petting the boys as they walk up to me. So one of the things about the particular summary that we just read, expected publication is October 28th of 2025, so I'm going to try to put this episode out on that day. It is about 320 pages in hardcover. I had the audiobook, which was incredibly well done, and I do like the darker, slightly grittier fairy tales. They don't have to be gory or horrific to have a dark, gritty sort of feel to them. So I think that's one of the things. Starling House, I'm not sure, may not have made it here just yet. It may be on a bookshelf that I still in the process of being moved. But Starling House, I really liked. It's kind of a slightly grown-up version, perhaps you could say, of Alice in Wonderland. If Alice didn't grow up in that cushy sort of like life with her cat and her, her daydreams and fantasies. Well, this one is kind of about, we hear a lot of stories about the Knights of the Round Table, so Arthur and his knights. And I think you can take that general gist because there is kind of some allusions and references, as I would call it, to Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, and Una is kind of a version of a knight. She's not Arthur. She is perhaps Gawain or Tristan or Lancelot or what have you. Anyway, she's very well thought of in history, and she has all these heroic deeds, and she slays the last dragon of the empire. And she, for her queen, she has overthrown nations and stolen crowns and all this sort of stuff. And so each time she returns to her queen, she says, what more can I do for you? And so one of the last things that she does for her queen is she does go and slay the last dragon. Well, that's where we kind of meet Owen Mallory. So Owen Mallory is kind of in what I would call the present, or could be Una's future, distant future, a thousand years future. And so from that point, Owen is kind of grown up reading these stories. In this particular summary that we just read, it says that Owen was a failed soldier, and I'm not really sure why it says that, because it seems as though he was injured in war and had an honorable discharge, so I'm not 100% certain why he was failed. Maybe I didn't interpret that correctly. But he goes to this particular location. He receives this address. Well, a book shows up, and then the book disappears, and then an address shows up, and he goes to this address, and there is this lady who seems to be fairly high in the upper echelons, and she wants Owen to write Una's history. And so some things take place, and Owen is whisked 1,000 years into the past to this particular point in Una's history where she is really on the fence about how she wants to proceed with her own story. And so, well, Owen has read this story before. He knows how this story is supposed to go. So sorry, had to have a little sip of coffee, because we do have coffee here on the Coffee Books and Rain channel. And I don't even know if I said that when I logged in or when I signed in. But anyway, Owen now finds himself in the past with Una. Una is very curious about this weird man who has now wandered into her life, and yet she does feel somehow drawn to him. So she doesn't push him away completely. She's like, all right, you can stay, but anyway. So he kind of becomes her scribe. Now, she doesn't really like scribes, and she doesn't really like bards, but something about him has convinced her to let him stay. Well, he convinces her, because she has pretty much given up, that she was not going to go kill this last dragon, but for Owen, she was willing to do it. Well, let's just say things play out, and he's kind of pulling the strings because he kind of knows what she's supposed to be doing, and so she lets him kind of lead the way. Well, they get to the hall where she's going to kneel before her queen, yada, 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 and boom, Owen's back into the present, 1,000 years back into the present. Things have ended in a very interesting way. Well, this story seems to do this kind of Groundhog's Day-esque loop where Owen continually gets, well, and I say continually, multiple times, but maybe not continually. He multiple times gets sucked into the past and starts to realize he can affect certain changes, which slightly rewrites history once he makes it back to the present. And he also discovers that someone else has an agenda that they want him to accomplish in order for their life to almost be picture perfect. So Owen is a pawn, Una is a pawn, and they are constantly getting pulled around by their heartstrings or whatever you want to say to relive these lives over and over again. Well, ultimately they do realize that they have the ability to make changes in their lives. Now, one of the things I will say is I thought that was incredibly interesting, and I did not understand for the first third of the book, what the general, what we were really working towards. It wasn't until what I would call the first Groundhog's Day moment, where we kind of relived that cycle, that I realized what was happening. Because the first time we go through the story, we go through from Owen's perspective. And then the second time we go through the story, we go through from Una's perspective, but things play out just a little bit differently, and we have a different perspective on the things that are happening. Well, there are a couple additional times, or at least one or two more, that I am vaguely trying to reference that will happen ultimately, because nobody gets, well, sometimes people get a happy ending on the first try, but sometimes it also takes a couple tries as well in order to make sure that things pan out the way they want. The time loop is very interesting for this general type of story. I'm guessing that's where this genre-defying kind of aspect comes from, is that looping time seems to be like the movie Looper, or, like Groundhog's Day. It's a little more sci-fi. And yet, the story that we are being told is much more fantasy romance, because since Una and Owen have been looping for an untold amount of time, because we do find out that maybe there were more that they don't fully remember, that they have fallen in love for numerous lifetimes. And it seems as they always find a way back to each other. And it isn't until they kind of take the reins that they try to figure out a way, I guess, for more or less to be together, and to figure out a way to actually kind of embrace this relationship that has been growing for the multiple times that they've been looping. So just very interesting. We have a nation that's in turmoil. We have this battle-worn knight who seems to be the crux of everything. We, of course, have someone who is trying to, I guess, utilize this sort of loop for their advantage, and it's just very cool. I was left with a book hangover because it's a really impactful story. I feel as though, now I have a couple of Alix E. Harrow's book. I don't think they're here though. I know I was looking previously for Starling House, but I thought I had at least one or two that did make it, but I don't think I did. They may be over there in one of the other book boxes that I haven't unboxed yet, because all my shelves are not here. This is literally the only shelf that has made it here. But I have like 6 more, and at least 3 of them are coming into this room. But anyway, so we have a legend that from the outside, or from the present, seems to not be changing, but yet it is, because every time Owen reaches the present, he realizes, and he kind of loops and kind of resets. He is starting to understand the changes that are happening, whether it be governmental structure, or whether it's like leading political party or anything like that. I thought this book was very clever, and I absolutely will be continuing to pick up Alix E. Harrow books for each time I find them. I was not okay by the end of this book. Again, it's got some book hangover that will definitely sit with you for a minute if this is your type of book. If you like, again, darker, grittier fairy tales, this might be one for you. It's not dark in the horrific or kind of what I would call gothic sort of ways, but it's definitely not Disney-fied. Things are not all sunshine and rainbows. This knight is going through some very hard things, and so is the scribe who is following her through her story. So they're not, they're not living these picture-perfect lives the way that history is writing them. And yet, That's how history likes to present itself. The history is written by the victors, so to speak. So, what happens when the victor is able to rewrite the past a little bit as well? I did think, I think because I didn't know where we were going with the story, that the first part of the book, like that first third, was a little bit slow. I wasn't sure what we were driving at. And then we started to loop the story, and that's when it started to click with me and make a little more sense. And then I was fully engaged, because at first I was like, I don't know what we're doing. And then it clicked, and I was like, okay, all right, now I'm in it. And I really couldn't put it down. Again, I had an audiobook, and it was really well done. It was very engaging. I thought the narrator did a wonderful job, and I highly recommend it. Now, I probably will go ahead and round it up to 5 stars just on Goodreads and NetGalley, but I probably give it more like 4.5, because it is a book that I'm going to want to add to my bookshelf, and it's a book that I'm going to want to recommend to others, especially if I know that they like kind of fantasy romance that's only just like a little bit spicy, but not too spicy. I would say like 1 pepper. Very few and far between, in my personal opinion, compared to some other romanticities. Very tame, almost fade-ish to black scenes, but in the way that romanticy, this is like that almost not courtly love. It's not even a slow burn, because they do fall for each other. It's just they're like them admitting to themselves and admitting to each other. And gosh, and then you start realizing, oh, they've been doing this sort of dance for who knows how many times. And it's just a really good story. But I'm going to go ahead and leave it here. Like I said, I had recorded this already, and of course this has probably gone in a completely different direction than the first time I recorded it, but that's okay. But with all of that being said, I want to thank you all so much. We did finally hit 500 subscribers, and that made me so excited. So once I am fully done with this move, which may be around the beginning of November, then I am going to try to put out like, I want to try to do just like a little, it's not a raffle. It's like if you leave a comment on like one of the last 5 episodes, then your name will go in a drawing. So it's a drawing for like a $50 book gift card. And when I say book, I mean that it'll probably either be like an Amazon gift card or a Barnes & Noble gift card, or a gift card where you are able to go find a book to enjoy. But I want to thank you all, and I hope to see you on the next page. Have a great one.